Alright guys, welcome back to the video. So this is the first of the daily uploads. So what we're going to be doing today is it's Sunday, and typically what I do on a Sunday is I clean up the shop. Because usually after a week of work, it's just become a disaster. And before I get into a new week, or because we're going to be starting a new project tomorrow, I want to make sure that I'm going into it with a nice clean shop, have all my machines nicely taken care of, and we're ready to go. So what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be cleaning the shop, fixing up some of the machines, and just kind of generally doing a shop tour. A lot of you have been asking me to do a shop tour, just kind of showing off some of my machinery and showing off the layout of my shop. So we're going to be doing that kind of while we clean it up. Okay, so starting with probably the least exciting thing in the shop, the lumber storage. Now, like I said, my shop is a disaster. I keep it that way because that's the way I like it. But anyway, I have basically four lumber storage areas or wood storage areas that are all just a complete mess. So first off, my first scrap area is this little wooden cart. This is where I keep kind of all of my automotive stuff, so spare oil for my truck, vehicle stuff. I'm not a car person. I don't really try to keep anything crazy in there, but that's all that's in there. Then on top of that, I try to keep all of my walnut scraps. So this is all mainly 8-quarter walnut, just pieces that I've cut off that are all kind of useful for, little different things. And generally this is just where I keep my walnut. That way I know if I need a piece of walnut, it's going to be there. So then on the main section of this wall, I've got all of my main lumber storage. Now again, obviously it is a complete disaster. As you can see, it's spreading out way further out than it's supposed to. The next spot is this little section here. Again, this is mainly my scraps. We've got cherry, walnut, ash, all this different stuff. All just kind of stashed here, just small pieces that I know kind of where they are. Then on the back wall, I have kind of my original lumber storage, which is just a set of Bora racks. It's a 7-level rack. It works okay, but I just found that storing lumber that way was super inefficient. It was really hard to find the pieces that you want. So now I just kind of stash scrap up there and it's out of the way. This is not a normal lumber storage spot, but this is all for the project we're going to be starting tomorrow. A whole bunch of 8-quarter lumber. I'll let you guys in the comments guess what we're going to be starting on. But yeah, this is basically all the wood I need, and it's a lot of really heavy stuff. So anytime I'm starting a big project and I'm just bringing the lumber to my shop and I know that I'm going to be starting that project really quickly, I just leave it out on a couple sawhorses so that I have good access to it. I can flip through all these boards, I can get them out of my way, move them around, cut off the pieces I need, and get them over to the milling process. There's no point stacking them up and getting them all nice and neatly because I'm just gonna have to dig them out as soon as I start the project anyway. The last two lumber areas I have is I've got a spot up at the end of the canoe there that is just all of my really thin pieces, so I can climb up there on a ladder, sort through them, and they're just they're nice thin pieces that I was afraid of storing them anywhere else they would get cracked really easily. So they're just kind of all of the offcuts from the bandsaw, basically. And then the last spot is obviously the tree that you guys saw me buy a few weeks ago. I've got that stacked behind my bandsaw there where I usually have a fan running. I turn that fan off, obviously, when I'm recording. But other than that, I do have a fan blowing on it, just keeping air flowing through it. So that's basically where I store all of my wood in the shop. It's, like I said, it's a complete disaster. It's spread out all over the place, but it works for me. But someday when I'm in a bigger shop, I do hope you organize it a little bit better because obviously trying to find the pieces that I need right now is a little bit of an annoying task to do. Okay, and so for the first area that we actually need to take some time to clean up is the lathe area. I had a pretty interesting project this last week. I made this 34-inch long rolling pin that has some variable depth pieces to it. There'll be some pictures of it on my Instagram once I've got it all ready to go. It's a pretty interesting little project, but obviously anything with the lathe makes an absolute mess. Now, one thing I do want to mention is the reason that I don't typically do a shop update, shop tours, anything like that, is because my shop layout changes basically on a monthly basis. If you've watched my videos, especially like the bedroom set, which took place over about 2 months, I think my shop layout changed like 5 times just in the course of that series. So I really like to, move things around. All of this stuff, except for my table saw and my workbench, can be moved around super easily. It's all on wheels, or I can, put it up on wheel bases. So it's really fun to just kind of reorganize the shop. And I keep experimenting, finding what works the best. And so far, the layout that I'm in right now is my favorite. Fairly recently, I moved the lathe back up against the garage door here. And so I basically got it as close to the door as I could possibly get it without having this big cart be in the way of the lasers that prevent the door from going up and down. So this works really well because if I'm turning something or if I'm working on a video on the lathe, I can open up the garage door, set the cameras outside, I have plenty of light coming in. This is just a really nice way to work. Plus, the lathe makes an absolute mess. So what's really nice about this is I can take the time to go around, vacuum and clean up the majority of the chips, make sure I dispose of them properly because that's really important. You don't want to be flooding your community with wood dust. But then all the little fine dust that doesn't get sucked up in the vacuum, I can come through with my air compressor and just blast it all outside. That really fine dust is not going to cause any issues, so you can just get it right out of the garage. So we're going to get this area cleaned up and it's going to be looking nice and spiffy once we're done. Okay, so next up is the kind of central island. So this is where most of the milling work gets done, plus the drilling. So we've got 4 machines here. We've got the joint on the back side, planer on that side, drill press here, and then drum sander here. Now, all 3 of these tools that take dust collection are all serviced by one tube that comes out from underneath my workbench and comes to all 3 machines. So it's a really good, efficient way to work, and it's kind of surprising because I know a lot of woodworkers know that having a little central island of tools and machinery is useful, but it's one of those things you don't really realize how useful it is until you do it for yourself. Because in most small shops, you're going to try to have things against the wall, and you want to have your open space in the middle. But what I found, it's actually a lot better to have a lot of your big machines, a lot of your machines that need a lot of pass-through through them, to have them right in the middle here. So the big thing with the drum sander is that it can do up to a 32-inch panel, which means it needs to be able to stick out all the way off to the side here. So we have good pass-through on both sides. Again, we basically have the full width of the shop on both sides of the drum sander. Really good setup here. Same thing with the planer. I've got full pass-through again, the full width of the shop. The controls are on this side, which is a little bit annoying. I'd prefer it if they were on this side, but again, there's only so much you can do. I don't find this to be too much of a hassle because again, it's not too hard to reach over the planer to just adjust that depth. But again, I've got full safe pass-through. I can pull the pieces out, stack them out here, and then my dust collection is being pulled that way, so it's completely out of the way anytime I'm passing stuff through. So it's really not a big deal at all. This is the one machine in the shop where I always wear hearing protection because it will damage your eardrums. With that, I usually just leave my hearing protection just hanging on the handle here because, like I said, this is the only machine in my shop where I need hearing protection for it. So I just leave it on the planer, put it on. I know as soon as I touch that handle, I have to put hearing protection on. So it's just one of those subtle reminders. Then we move over to the jointer here. So again, I've got full pass-through. The one caveat to that is if I'm using my fence here, I just have to lower the table on my drum sander, which is a little bit annoying. Sometimes I forget and things get jammed up. Not that big of a deal. Again, all I do is just drop the table here and I have full pass-through. The way I could solve it is just pulling the jointer out a little bit more, but it's where it is. I don't really feel like moving it all for, every once in a while when I have to drop the table there. Because we do have perfectly good pass-through. Then finally we have the drill press. Now this is one of my favorite machines that I've added to the shop recently. This is the Rikon benchtop drill press. It's a 3/4 horsepower variable speed. You deal with the variable speed just by moving this lever here. So there's 2 different gears inside, so a high range and a low range. But for the most part, I leave it on the low range, and I just use this little lever here to adjust it from, I think it's 300 to 750, which does most of your larger bits. Then I've got this really small 1/8 bit in there, so I have it up on the high speed right now. Again, this is one of the best drill presses on the market right now. So even though this is the area where the most dust and chips get made, it's probably the cleanest just because all of these tools are hooked up to dust collection. Anytime you're cleaning around machinery and you have a vacuum, make sure you go over the motors with that vacuum. So on the drill press here, we have the air intake right at the top here. Anywhere you see these open grates is anywhere the motor is pulling in air. What you want to try and avoid is having dust build up in there because that'll burn out your motor and that could potentially catch on fire if you get a lot of dust build up in there. So the drill press has the exposed motor there. Same with the drum sander on that side there. You just vacuum off there. Same thing, jointer on the bottom. And then on the DeWalt planers, it's just a little import take on the side there. So cleaning out those areas is one of the most important things. Anytime you're cleaning in your shop, make sure you're vacuuming out those areas because it's one of those things that's going to make your machines last longer and prevent fires. And the only machine in this area that really needs any kind of maintenance is this Laguna or Supermax 1632 drum sander. Now, I'm going to be putting out a review about this machine sometime in the future because this is one of those machines that, the whole Supermax line, Laguna's whole Supermax line of drum sanders is very hyped up on the internet. But I have a lot of really not nice things to say about this machine, but I'm going to save it for there. But mainly the things that I do to this machine to make sure it's up and running for the next time I need it is I need to adjust where the belt is because this is one of the biggest issues this machine has. The belt tracking, it just doesn't work. I've tried keeping it tight to one side, keeping it tight to the other, and no matter what I do, no matter how loose or tight I have it, the belt always seems to want to walk off. So it always gets jammed up, and now the edge of it is pretty frayed because it's rubbing on the edges here. Okay, so the drum sander is all tuned up now. I've got the tables all leveled out. I've got the belt tracking pretty good. I also went in and oiled the bushings, which is something that you're really supposed to do every month on this thing. I try to do it every 1 to 2 weeks. You just put a little bit of 3-in-1 oil on all 3 of the bushings there. Don't put it on the drive one. I made that mistake once, then I had to clean the oil off. That was dumb of me. But yeah, just on the little bronze bushings, just throw some oil in there. It helps it run a lot better. And next up is kind of my bandsaw corner. This really is the only machine that's in this area here. But like I said before, I do have the tree that I bought stacked back there and all the slabs. It's all nicely stacked back there. Then I've got that little cabinet up there that I keep some of my first aid stuff in, some of the stuff that's not like quick response. And just camera batteries, gloves, stuff like that. Stuff that I don't need in a hurry. But mainly this is the area just for the bandsaw. And so again, here I have pretty good pass-through on the machine. The only reason the bandsaw ended up in this location is purely because I used to have a 4-inch hose hooked up to the underside of it. I no longer use that. I mostly use a shop vac for dust collection on here because it works a lot better. But the bandsaw is still living here because it's just a good spot for it. There's not really any other good spaces in the shop for it. So if I ever need like really long pass-through, like I'm going to need on this upcoming project, what I'll do is I'll just move the bandsaw somewhere else. It's on a wheeled platform, so it's very easy to move it out. And really all I need to do to get good pass-through is just pull it out and set it right here. Then I can get all the pass-through that I need. And the best part about this is the bandsaw is just kind of out of the way and using up pretty much what would be dead space if I didn't have the bandsaw here. Also in this back corner here, I do have the air hose hooked up, so the actual air compressor is under the steps here. There's the steps that go up and out to the door there. Then the air compressor is just stashed under there. It's left plugged in, and then I've got a reel up on the top corner there that I can then pull the hose out to get around. I'm probably going to move that reel at some point in time because it's really annoying to climb through all this stuff just to get that air hose, and I'm using it a lot more now, especially with the lathe, so that might be moving sometime in the future, but for now, it's just stashed back there. And then the last area to clean up is obviously the table saw workbench area, the actual working area of the shop. So this is where I do, all my joinery, all of my main work. The workbench is kind of the center of your shop, so same as the table saw. These 2 areas are where I spend most of the time in the shop, either building stuff on the workbench or cutting stuff to size on the table saw. So these areas are what get the most clutter built on them over the time that I'm working, especially the workbench. At the beginning of the week, I'll start out with a nice 8-foot long workbench. By the end of the week, I'm working on like 2 feet on the very end of it. I'm sure most of you can understand that mentality because you just kind of, as you pull out tools, you forget to put them away and you just kind of keep pushing them down to the far side of your workbench and you just end up with a smaller and smaller and smaller space. So what I've done so far today is as I'm cleaning up, anything that I know belongs over here, lives in one of these cabinets or that, I put it on the workbench so that I can put it away. Alright, so now we have the old area cleaned up, we've got all the tools in that put away. Let's go over what's in some of these cabinets just because this is the actual shop tour part of it. So a lot of the other cabinets and stuff that you guys have seen during the shop tour, they're not really used for any of my woodworking stuff. Obviously there's some drawers in that I keep things like sandpaper, and just some of my generic tools in that in. One of the whole cart underneath the lathes is all full of old Ryobi tools, stuff that is good to have, but not really stuff that I need on a continuous basis. So they're not really, it's not really exciting to show. Whereas all the stuff in this section here is what I use on a day-to-day basis. So this top cabinet here is kind of a disaster zone, but this basically has the majority of my stuff. So I've got all of my hand planes, I've got my roughing plane that I use for cleaning glue squeeze out, I've got my block plane, my router plane, my smoke shave, my little Bosch drill. If you need one drill for your wood shop, this is a really good option. It's nice and small, you can get in a lot of places, it's really easy to take to do installs, all that kind of stuff. One of the best tools I've ever had. The top shelf is a little bit more generic storage. I've got extra respirator bits. I've got a scarf for sometimes, if you're doing a lot of chiseling, it's nice to have something to put your elbow down on, or you can wrap it up around your face if you're getting a lot of stuff blown back at you, but generally you should wear a dust mask. I also have a stapler up there, a dowel, an old doweling jig, and just random stuff. This bottom shelf is where I have, most of the stuff that I actually use. Nitro gloves, always good to have nitro gloves around. This little box just holds all kinds of random little bits of hardware that don't really fit in a storage area that I'll show you in a second here. Some extra drill bits, random crap. My DeWalt drill, again, another really good option. This is the DeWalt Atomic style, so it's more compact, has a decent amount of power to it. Really nice upgrade from, again, the Ryobi ones that I was using before. And then all of my different epoxies, oils, a little bit of WD-40 dry lube, and then a whole bunch of MDF spacer blocks. So this is just kind of my catch-all cabinet for stuff that I need quickly. It's all just kind of there. So below that, we have this little cabinet. This is one of my first woodworking videos on YouTube. It's one of my, I think it was actually my second attempt at cutting dovetails. So I still have this cabinet in use. It's hung up on the wall here, and this is where I keep all of my marking, measuring, layout stuff. So I've got my tape measures, my squares, all of my setup blocks in the bottom there. And then on this bottom shelf, I keep a tourniquet and an Israeli bandage. So the idea for this mainly came from Alex Steele. He's a blacksmith. He's done a lot of stuff on his channel regarding trauma care and that, because in a metal shop, there's a lot of stuff that can quickly cause severe trauma. In the wood shop, realistically, the only severe trauma that we're really likely to face is losing our digits or, cutting somewhere else. So the trick is you always want to be as prepared as possible. So there are things that can lead to pretty severe injuries. Things like if you're working with a circular saw, it catches and comes back, that can very easily cut the top of your leg. You've got arteries down there, you want to be able to get something on there quick. So that's where the Israeli bandage or the tourniquet are extremely important, because these are meant to cut off that blood and make sure that that wound is completely covered and sealed so that you're not just gushing blood everywhere. And the only thing that these are meant to do is make you survive long enough to get out and get to help. So rule number one, when you're someone that like me that works alone in a garage, is you should not be trying to do all the first aid yourself. The most important thing is getting yourself in front of people when you work alone. So that's why I keep a garage door opener right by my workbench here. So in the case of a severe emergency, all I need to do is open that garage door, go out in the middle of the street and just start screaming like a banshee. And hopefully someone will come out and call an ambulance, do all that while I'm trying to administer first aid to myself. So that's the important thing, because if you're trying to sit here and put a tourniquet on, your mind is going crazy. You're probably not going to think to call an ambulance, or you might be calling an ambulance and not be doing the important stuff that actually could save your life. So it's really important to just have some way in your garage to call for help, get help, do something like that. Again, we all carry cell phones. Make sure that it's always with you, always charged, and you know how to get to it. So that's going to be the best thing. But definitely having some trauma care first aid supplies is very important. Also on this wall, I have a generic first aid kit. So this just has like bandages and that in it, stuff for your light duty. This has a lot of my more generic stuff in it. Again, this is just a normal Red Cross first aid kit. So in the case of if I cut off a finger, there are bandages in here that are meant for wrapping up that wound, getting it in there. And then also I keep some plastic bags in here so that if I need to, I can put that finger in that plastic bag. Once I get it wrapped up, I can go get some ice, put that finger on ice, and then hopefully get myself to a hospital. But all of that is in here. There's also some tweezers, which if you're a woodworker, that's really important. So always keep a first aid kit right close to your bench. Now you are going to want to get a pretty good first aid kit. Even if you've never taken a first aid course before, get a first aid kit. It's one of the things that can save your life, because most of the things in here are pretty self-explanatory. You cut off a finger, get a bandage around it. That can literally save your life. So get a first aid kit. Even if you're not willing to take a first aid course, get a first aid kit, have it at the ready. And I highly recommend taking a first aid course. I've taken a few first aid courses when I was younger. I still have all that knowledge. And when I can afford it, I plan to go back and refresh at least my standard first aid. Beside that, I have a big fire extinguisher. This is a big one. So this is meant for if something severely catches on fire, something like the wood rack, the dust collector, anything like that. Always keep a large fire extinguisher, and you want to make sure it's an ABC fire extinguisher right close to wherever your dust collector is. So I have a few fire extinguishers spread out around the shop. I've got a small one right by the door. I've got this big one here. And then the third one is back in the back corner, where I showed you guys where I keep the walnut before. It's back in that corner, again, in areas where I might need to quickly react to it. So over by the door, by the bandsaw, I've got a nice small one where if I'm in the house and I see flames out here through the window, I can come out here, grab the small one, start with that. So this big one is really the thing that is meant to be the thing to fight the fire with if something were to break out in here. But it is super important to have a good fire extinguisher right by your dust collector. So my dust collector is right there. If I'm standing at my workbench, the dust collector lights off, or I'm working at the table saw and the dust collector lights off, all I have to do, come over here, grab my fire extinguisher and shoot. Or move around the workbench and shoot, whatever works. I see a lot of people on YouTube who don't talk enough about that, and who clearly in the background of their videos, you're not seeing things like first aid kits and fire extinguishers out and visible. I think it's extremely important if you are going to be a responsible woodworker, and if you ever want to have a commercial shop, this stuff is so important to have out and around. So you need to think like that when you're setting up your own shop. I know it might just be a home shop, but having a big fire extinguisher, having something at the ready to go is so vitally important, because again, it's the difference between having a shop and having a bunch of ashes on the ground. And so then this cart is all of my hand tools and power tools that, again, I use on a daily basis. So the top drawer here is my mess of hand tools. So I've got all my chisels, my saws, all my other random chisels and cutting tools. And then my little angle jack just lives on the side there in its little plain bag. So this so far has worked out for me. It's not beautiful, but it's functional. Below that is some of my more random stuff. So on this side of this cabinet, I've got all of my sharpening stones in that. Sitting in a water tub. That way I just can pull them out, put them on my workbench, sharpen my tools. On the other side here, I've got a lot of my table saw accessories. So Things like so for my saw stop, I have the extra brake cartridges, the extra throat plates, the wrenches, all that kind of stuff. Then on the bottom here, I have other blades. So I've got a brand new blade that I'm excited to put on my table saw. I've got a dado stack. Then I've got my tenoning jig at the very back there. Then I've got my Bosch routers and sander, and then a little Dremel. So all this stuff is just kind of things that I need to grab every single day. It's all sitting right here. It's all ready to go. So in the last cabinet here is just kind of my finishing supplies and other hardware stuff. So the bottom here is all the different finishes I have, my tried and trues. I've got some other older stuff at the back. I've got some milk paint, some log sealer for when I cut down that tree. And then these two boxes are all of my screws, assorted screws in that. I keep everything from number 4 up to number 8 in a whole bunch of different lengths and that, just because that's what I found is useful. This black tray is all of my Horton Brasses hardware. I haven't ordered from them in quite a while because the last time I did, I made like a big $500 order from them, stocked up, made sure it was all sitting here because the worst thing as a Canadian trying to order from the States is having that stuff cross the border takes forever. So I always want to have it as ready as possible. I am gearing up for another pretty big order from them sometime soon here because these areas are starting to get a little bit empty. On the other side here, we've got, again, just more random hardware. On the top here is all my glues and, I got some spray bottles and cleaning supplies and that. So I basically have all the popular glues and I use them for just different things. I've got a little bit of Type On 1, Type On 3 right there. I believe this bottle is Type On 2. I just have it hidden in a Gorilla Glue bottle. Then I do have a bottle of actual Gorilla Glue, a little bit of hide glue, and then a little bit of Type On 2 dark. And then behind that, I have my finishing pad. So it's just kind of an honorable mention. On the back here is where I keep all of my clamps and that. I've got my router table set up here. I've got all of my F clamps on the front here, pipe clamps in the back, some pipe clamps on the floor. All of my glue up cauls are on that back wall. Obviously the dust collector is right here. I've got a whole video coming out about my whole dust collection system, how it works and all that. So I'm not going to talk about it too much here because that video is actually pretty cool. All right, so that is the shop all cleaned up and ready to go to start on our project tomorrow. So obviously, as you kind of look behind me, things are not completely cleaned up. I've had to kind of move things around. That cherry blank that you've kind of seen floating around behind me, those of you that saw the video that came out before this one know what that's for. We're going to be doing live streams every Sunday at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and we're going to be starting with that cherry blank to hand carve a paddle. And so I said that I only clean the shop really on Sundays. Now this has been a tradition of mine for the past few months or so. Every Sunday, because it's a little bit of a quieter day, I'm usually tired after the week of work. It's just nice to get out here, clean the shop because it's a nice simple task to do. You just start by grabbing a couple tools, putting them back in their place, stuff like that, run around with the vacuum. It's really easy to clean up the shop on a nice Sunday afternoon when you can just put some music on and relax. So one thing I do want to mention is that I don't only clean the shop on Sundays. Every night before I close down the shop, before I turn off the lights, go inside, start to relax for the evening, I always make sure to check the key areas that are going to be a hazard. So things like tripping hazards. If I need to move through the garage for some reason in the middle of the night, I need to open the door to evacuate stuff. Then I need to make sure that there's clear pathway. So I always make sure when I close down the shop at night that there's a clear pathway from the door all the way through to where I am right now at the workbench and out the big garage door. So I always want to make sure that I can move around here safely and freely in the night. That I'm not going to leave hoses and that lying on the floor, electric cables, air hoses, stuff like that. I make sure I put away all that kind of stuff at night. That way it's safe to come in here in the morning. The other important thing to do is to clear out any potential fire hazards. So things like dust building up on electrical outlets, especially around the lathe. I always clean off the power bar that I have beside it. I make sure there's no dust on it anytime I'm not actually using it. So I'm constantly clearing the dust off that, just keeping it as safe as possible. Same thing, any of your dust piles that end up building around your workbench. If you're doing a lot of hand planing, you can get a lot of really fluffy, fine shavings sitting around here, and those are one of the biggest fire hazards. So that is the layout of my shop and how I go about cleaning my shop in kind of a methodical way. I always start at the lathe, move myself back and around, and end at the workbench. Because when I'm cleaning everything else, I just kind of pile everything on my workbench, and I know that this is kind of the final boss stage of the cleaning process. Then I can put everything away. Then I know once my workbench is clear, the shop is ready to go. So as always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you check back tomorrow because we're going to be starting that new project that I am super excited to get into. And we're going to be starting to break down a whole bunch of that 8-quarter lumber and starting to put things together. So it's going to be a super cool time, and I'm really excited to start doing these daily uploads for you guys. So guys, as always, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.